This farmer had gone deep into the wilderness looking for fruit, but what he ended up finding would leave the whole world stunned. What he discovered that day was something no one could have imagined. It was the sound of birds chirping in the soft early morning breeze that woke this man, Ho Khan, from his sleep. It wasn't strange for him to rise that early, but this morning felt different. All through the night, something had been weighing on his mind, something he'd decided to do the night before, and now he couldn't shake the feeling that today mattered. A quiet restlessness had followed him into the morning. Ho Khan lived a simple life. He was a farmer, working just outside a quiet village called Phong Nha in Vietnam. It was 1991, and while Vietnam was slowly starting to open up to the world after years of hardship, life for Khan still moved to the same steady rhythm it always had. He wasn't caught up in politics or big changes, just focused on the land, the seasons, and taking care of his family. But that day would change everything. As he got ready for the day, Khan had no idea how different his life was about to become. He was just one man with no big dreams beyond putting food on the table. So how could someone like that end up discovering something so incredible, so unexpected, that it would capture the world's attention? The thick forest surrounding his village had always been more than just a place to gather food. It held a quiet mystery that had always pulled him in. As a farmer, Khan spent much of his time foraging for herbs, hunting, and when he could, venturing deeper into the forest. He loved it out there. It felt wild and alive. And sometimes, if he was lucky, he could find a rare fruit that only grew in the most hidden parts of the jungle. This fruit wasn't just tasty. It was believed to have powerful healing properties. Herbalists from nearby villages talked about it often, and demand had started to grow. That's why Khan had packed up for a new trip into the forest, even knowing how risky it could be. The night before, he had quietly gathered his supplies: a machete, a sack for collecting the fruit, a lantern, and a few tools to help him find his way. He had a mix of nervous energy and excitement. He'd been through this forest before, but this time he planned to go further than ever. He wondered what he might run into. Animals, steep terrain, who knows? Still, the chance to discover something new always pushed him forward. By the time dawn rolled in, Khan was on the move. He walked fast, trying to cover as much ground as he could before the sun rose high. His goal was to reach an untouched part of the forest where he thought the rare fruit might grow. Hours went by as he hiked through thick trees and undergrowth, places few had ever dared to explore. It was already well into the afternoon when something felt off. The light around him started to shift, and a strange stillness crept through the trees. Khan paused and looked up. The sky, which had been clear and blue just hours ago, was now dark and heavy. A huge mass of clouds had rolled in, blocking the sunlight and casting the entire forest in a strange, dim light. It felt like dusk had arrived early, and the air around him suddenly felt different. A deep, growing roar echoed through the forest, still far off, but clearly heading his way. A storm was coming, and fast. Without wasting a second, this man scanned the trees around him, searching for anything with wide enough branches to give some protection. He spotted one and ran straight for it, his heart racing just as the first drops began to fall. Moments later, the sky let loose. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, and a sharp wind howled through the trees, cutting across his skin like blades. Khan rushed to unpack the small camp tent he had brought, fumbling with the fabric as he tried to get it set up before the wind grew worse. His hands moved fast, securing the corners as best as he could. But just as he thought he had it steady, a strong gust tore the tent out of his hands and sent it flying through the air. He stood there, soaked and stunned, now completely exposed to the storm. His panic kicked in fast. He spun around, scanning the area through the rain. That's when he noticed something, a small opening carved into the base of a cliff, almost hidden behind thick vines and leaves. It wasn't obvious at first, but now that he saw it, he didn't hesitate. Khan took off running, mud clinging to his boots as he slipped through the rain and dove into the opening. Inside, the cave gave him instant relief. The stone walls muffled the chaos outside, and the cold, steady darkness wrapped around him. He stood there, breathing hard, letting his heartbeat settle. But before he could even relax, something made him stop cold. A sound, quiet but clear, echoed through the space. He held his breath and listened. Was that just the wind? Or something else? The longer he stood there, the more his body tensed. Something about the noise felt wrong. The hair on his arms stood up. Beneath the rain and wind outside, another sound started to rise, a deep, low rumble coming from somewhere further inside. Khan stayed completely still. It wasn't a growl like any animal he'd ever heard. This was different, older. It stirred something deep inside him, something that made his chest tighten. He couldn't explain it, but the sound carried a weight, a feeling that sent a chill down his spine. Just then, the storm picked up again. Wind blasted straight into the cave's entrance, driving rain further inside. Khan had no choice but to back away from the entrance, moving deeper into the shadows to stay dry. Each step he took echoed louder than the last, and the further he went, the darker it became. His heart was pounding now, louder than the storm. And that's when the thought hit him. Wait, am I really in a cave? The idea seemed impossible. Caves weren't something anyone talked about around here. Sure, he'd heard stories, tales from travelers about hunters finding hidden caves, some filled with wild animals, even dangerous ones. But those were always about faraway places. Not Vietnam, not this forest. No one in his village had ever found a cave like this. He stood still, trying to process what was happening. It wasn't just the fact that he was in a cave. It was the feeling, the strange energy of the place. Something about it wasn't normal. It felt ancient, untouched. His thoughts started racing as he reached out to steady himself, his fingers brushing against the cold, damp rock wall beside him. The cave was far larger than Khan had expected. It wasn't just a small shelter from the storm. It was something massive. The air inside was heavy, filled with a strange, earthy scent he didn't recognize. Once the storm had passed, Khan cautiously stepped back out into the open. His clothes were soaked through, but his mind was racing with questions. He turned to look back at the cave, its wide opening still shrouded in mist, and behind that mist he could still faintly hear the echo of a hidden river. That cave stuck in his thoughts. Even as he stood there holding the fruit he had come looking for, it wasn't the harvest that filled his mind. It was the cave. Something about it kept pulling at him, but the strange sounds he had heard and the fear of not knowing what lay further in had stopped him from exploring that day. He returned to his normal life, working on his farm, gathering herbs, and going about his quiet routine. But the cave never left his mind. That deep, low rumble he had heard in the darkness had left its mark. It sounded like nothing he'd ever heard before. That sound alone had been enough to make him stop all those years ago. Yet he couldn't stop wondering. What was hiding deeper inside? What secrets had he walked away from? As time passed, the questions didn't fade. If anything, they grew stronger. By 2009, almost 20 years had passed. Khan was older now, but that feeling, the one he had buried for so long, was still there. He finally decided he couldn't ignore it anymore. But this time, he wouldn't go alone. He reached out to a group of British cavers, experienced explorers led by a man named Howard Limbert. When Khan first approached them, explaining what he had found and the strange sounds he had heard, they were skeptical. With no photos or solid proof, it was hard for them to believe. But Khan didn't back down. The way he described the cave, the detail in his words, and the genuine emotion behind them, it made the team pause. What if he was telling the truth? After some back and forth, they agreed to see it for themselves. The team began preparing their gear, not fully sure what they'd find, but intrigued enough to take the chance. This could be something big, maybe even the kind of discovery that only happens once in a lifetime. Once they reached the forest, Khan led the way. He knew the path by heart. When he stopped, the team looked around, confused at first. The entrance didn't look like much, just a crack in the cliffside, partly covered by plants. Nothing about it screamed world-changing. But as they stepped closer, something in the air shifted. The whole place felt heavier, almost electric with mystery. Howard and his team exchanged looks, their cameras already rolling. They moved in carefully, squeezing through the narrow entrance, their gear brushing against the rough stone. The temperature dropped, and the air grew damp, thick with the scent of moss and earth. As they made their way deeper, their headlamps began to reveal more than they expected. Then, without warning, the tight passage opened up into an enormous space. A massive chamber stretched out before them, so vast it left them speechless. Khan, who had only seen a tiny portion of the cave decades ago, stood frozen in awe. "Is this even real?" someone whispered, their voice bouncing off the cavern walls. This wasn't just a cave. It was like an entire world hidden under the surface. Towering stalagmites and stalactites surrounded them, some of them taller than buildings. The space felt alive, untouched, like something out of a different time. Khan had named the cave Sandung, combining the word san, meaning mountain, with dung, taken from the name of the valley where the ethnic Gru Van Clu group lived. And now, standing in its heart, the explorers realized this was something the world had never seen before. "How did this stay hidden for so long?" one of them asked, still staring up in disbelief. But the journey wasn't over. As they ventured deeper into the cave, a sound returned. Faint at first, then louder. That same eerie rumble Khan had heard all those years ago now echoed through the chamber. It wasn't wind, it wasn't water. It was something else, something ancient. Even the most seasoned cavers froze, their eyes wide, unsure of what was waiting in the darkness ahead. But this team wasn't easily rattled. They were trained professionals, experts in reading the land and unlocking the secrets of the earth. After taking some time to analyze the strange sounds, they figured it out. It wasn't a creature at all. The eerie rumble was actually caused by wind sweeping through the enormous chambers and narrow tunnels, creating a haunting, echoing sound that felt almost like music from another world. As hours turned into days, the team kept exploring, and with each step, their excitement grew. The deeper they went, the more they realized this wasn't just a cave. It was a maze, a massive underground system stretching nearly 9 kilometers. That's when it hit them. They were standing in the largest known natural cave on the planet. The news landed like a thunderclap. Up until then, the Mammoth Cave System in the United States had held the record. It was impressive, sure, but compared to what they had just walked into, it didn't even come close. Songdung was on a different level entirely. The explorers stood in stunned silence. This wasn't just a hidden cave. It was a natural wonder, a secret world buried beneath their feet for thousands of years, only now revealing itself. But the size wasn't the only thing that left them speechless. As they pushed deeper into the darkness, their headlamps revealed more and more of the cave's breathtaking interior. It looked like something out of a science fiction film or a storybook about lost worlds. Towering stalactites, some nearly 80 meters tall, hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Every direction they turned, nature's handiwork was on full display. It was like the earth had been carving this masterpiece in secret for ages. And then came the first real shock. Tucked deep within the cave, far from any light or life outside, the team found an underground river. It hadn't appeared on any map. No one had ever known it existed. Yet there it was, crashing through the darkness, its current strong and alive. The water raced along the stone walls, roaring so loudly that the explorers had to raise their voices just to be heard over it. The noise filled the space like a living force, as if the cave itself was guarding its secrets with every drop of water. It was raw, powerful, and untouched. But even that wasn't the most unbelievable thing they would see. As they continued their journey, pushing further than anyone had ever gone, their lights revealed something that made them stop in their tracks. Their beams swept across a chamber so large it seemed impossible. and what they saw inside it took their breath away. Could this really be happening? Was it possible there was an entire forest inside the cave? Their hearts pounded as they stepped closer, trying to make sense of it. But there was no denying what they were seeing. Right there, deep underground, was a green, living forest, a full ecosystem, plants, trees, and even a fine mist hanging in the air. Somehow, there was even a kind of weather inside this sealed-off world. Tiny creatures darted through the undergrowth, species no one had ever studied. The plants looked like nothing found above ground, thriving quietly in the filtered light from openings high above. The team could hardly speak. It didn't seem real. How could a place like this exist, completely hidden from the world? And what other secrets were still buried deeper in the dark? Whatever they had discovered, it wasn't just historic. It was something that would completely reshape how the world understood nature and the incredible mysteries it still holds. As they stood there, staring in disbelief at this hidden world, the team realized something incredible. Song Dung wasn't just a cave. It was a gateway to a world untouched by time, a place where the usual rules of nature didn't seem to apply. At one point, the cave's ceiling had collapsed, creating a massive opening above, now called Dolin 1. Sunlight poured through this skylight, lighting up a scene that looked like it came from a dream. Beneath the opening was a lush jungle. Trees stretched toward the sky, some as tall as buildings. The ground was thick with ferns, moss, and plants that looked like they hadn't changed in millions of years. It was a rainforest, alive and thriving in total isolation. How could something like this exist, hidden inside a cave? The answer was just as wild as the sight itself. Song Dung had formed its own weather system. Mist from the underground river would rise, condense, and fall as rain, watering the forest below. The ecosystem didn't rely on the outside world. It had everything it needed, sealed inside. A self-sustaining world, buried in darkness, waiting to be found. And that was just the beginning. As the team moved deeper, they kept finding things that made them stop in their tracks. On the floor were giant cave pearls, perfectly rounded and as big as baseballs. They had formed slowly over thousands of years, shaped drop by drop through mineral deposits. The patience of nature was written all over this place, but the most unbelievable part of the journey was still ahead. After several days underground, the explorers hit a wall, literally. A giant wall of calcite nearly 90 meters tall stood in their way. They called it the Great Wall of Vietnam. It looked like a piece of an ancient fortress built by nature herself. No one knew what was on the other side. They didn't have the gear to climb it then, so they had to turn back, leaving the mystery for another time. In 2010, they returned, this time with everything they needed. Climbing the wall was no small task, but once they reached the top, what they saw left them stunned. On the other side was a lake. Not just any lake, a crystal-clear stretch of emerald green water that looked like it had never been touched. Calm, silent, perfect. It felt like a secret oasis tucked away deep beneath the earth. But even that raised more questions. What was beneath the lake? What other secrets could it be hiding? The team was buzzing with excitement, but they also knew the deeper they went, the more dangerous things could become. Still, they had come this far, and there was no turning back. When news of Song Dung's discovery broke, it spread like wildfire. Scientists, explorers, and nature lovers around the world were blown away. The pictures, the videos, the stories, it all felt too unreal to be true. But it was. And it had all started with one man. For Ho Khan, the humble farmer who had stumbled into the cave during a storm all those years ago, it was deeply personal. He had always felt something was hidden in those woods, something worth finding. Now, standing at the edge of the Great Wall of Vietnam, looking out over the lake, all those memories came rushing back. That rainy morning, the strange sounds, the feeling in his gut that something was waiting just beyond the shadows. Who could have guessed that a quiet man looking for fruit would one day uncover one of the most incredible Natural Wonders on Earth. Khan's discovery didn't just change his life, it changed the way the world sees nature. Every year now, just 1,000 lucky visitors from around the globe are allowed to enter Songdong, and every single one of them walks away in awe. The towering formations, the hidden forest, the underground river, and that glowing green lake. It's a journey no one forgets. For many, it's more than just a cave. It's a step back in time, a place where Earth has been keeping secrets for millions of years. So, what other discovery do you think comes close to this one? Would you have had the courage to go inside that cave? Tell us in the comments. And as always, see you in the next story.